I experienced that people become below themselves when they're really hard in their heart, when they just finish a love relation and they have a broken heart, or so when they are with a broken heart and I talk with them, it's like they lost their mind.
Yes, I agree. Yes. And so what is happening there? There it is a lack of humility. In other words, they don't want to feel the truth, but they want to feel their own truth. So for example, when a person leaves a partner, they feel that that partner, that leaving the partner is the end of their life, many times. Now that's not very logical, considering they're still alive. It's not very logical, but that's what we believe, that it's the end of my life, it's the end of my existence as I know it, it's terrible, it's the worst thing that could happen to me, and so forth. And it's obviously not necessarily the worst thing that could happen to us, but we believe that to be so because we're afraid to feel alone. We're afraid to feel a number of other emotions. And often it's our lack of humility, our lack of our ability to feel our fears that causes us to believe things that are false.
So people must be careful about their thoughts when their heart is hurted for a while, until the heart is better, is getting better, whole.
Yes, in other words, they need to be careful acting upon their fear-based thoughts. Right? Do you understand what I mean by that? So we often, with our emotions, we often have great levels of, let's write some down, our emotions. We often inside of us have grief, and then often inside of us we have fears of our grief. We are afraid that we cannot feel certain things. For many of us, to feel the emotion of being alone is so terrifying that we construct all of our life so that we're never alone. Like quite often I've seen people go from one relationship and then within a few weeks they're in another relationship. And a few weeks after the end of that relationship they're in another relationship. Why is that? Because they're afraid to be alone for a longer period of time and work out why the first relationship went bust. Our fear causes us to do many things. Our fears then generate, we are addicted to looking after what we're afraid of. Do you understand what I mean by an addiction? Yes? So we become addiction, not just a physical addiction like smoking or drinking or something like that, or eating, but we have emotional addictions. We badly need somebody to give us a certain feeling. If the person gives us a certain feeling, we feel good. If the person doesn't give us that feeling, we feel bad. And they cover our fears. When we are willing to face our fears, we no longer are willing to live in our addictions. When we don't meet our addictions, we often then go into other emotions, such as anger, annoyance, frustration, all those kind of emotions. And even right up the top, quite often I would put complete denial. I'm not angry. I'm not afraid. I'm not sad. And so forth. And denial is an intellectual tool, a mind-based tool that we use to get over all of the construction of these different emotions, to get over the pain of having to feel these things. In other words, to get over the pain of having to feel humble. If we were willing to feel humble, willing to feel everything, we would know, oh boy, I feel angry now. Wow, why do I feel angry now? Oh, it's because my addiction isn't getting met. What addiction is it? Oh, I need my partner to every single day tell me that she loves me. And today she didn't. Right? So now I feel upset and angry. Right? Or I feel I need my partner to have sex with me every day because that's the way I feel loved. And today we didn't have sex. Now I feel upset, angry. Right? Humility lets me see these things. Notice what's actually happening.
And because we are not humble, and so we go then into pseudo spirituality.
Yes. When we're not humble, we're not willing to feel these emotions, we then say, all those emotions I don't need to have happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create, through my denial, I'm going to create my own happiness. Not realising that I can't be happy until all my grief is gone. I can't be happy until all my fears have gone. I can't be happy until all my addictions are gone. Then I can be happy. Now, for most of us, that means that we won't be happy for a while yet. And that's okay too. It's okay to not be happy for a while until those things are gone. Right? But what we often do is we create a state of pseudo-happiness. We use spirituality to create a pseudo-happiness, a fake happiness. Right? And this is where a large attraction to the New Age movement is. To create feelings of happiness, contentment, security, right, that we have to work on every single moment to create. You know, this is why there's meditative techniques involved and so forth, because you have to work on it to create it. What I'm suggesting to you is if you follow things God's way and actually feel all of your grief and feel all of your fear and feel all of your addictions and even feel your anger when you need to feel it, right? Not act upon it, but feel it. What will happen is you'll release those things from you. When you release those things from you, you are now capable of complete happiness. Right? And you don't have to do a thing to be happy. You get to the point where you don't have to meditate to be happy. You don't have to think about happy thoughts to be happy. You're just automatically happy. Right? And once you become at one with God, in fact, you can become automatically happy all the time. No sadness, no grief, no fear, no anger, ever. Always happy. That's the potential you have. And it makes sense that a loving God would provide that potential, would it not? Yeah. And I feel what happens for the majority of people is they're not willing to feel their own grief. And so what do we want? We want other people to make us feel better. We want other people to make us not feel sad, to cheer us up. Right? And we're not willing to feel our fear, so what we want is to either feed our fear instead of feeling our fear. We feed it, like we get the newspaper every day because we're afraid to not do that. We're afraid to not read the newspaper even for one day because we need to know what's happening in the world so that it makes us feel like we know and therefore can feel less afraid of what might be happening. We feed our fears. We try to make our fears go away by giving our fears more information. That's what we try to do. And our addictions, we finish up feeding our addictions. So many of us finish up with physical addictions, like we eat too much, or we drink too much, or we smoke too much, or we do all sorts of things too much. Or, for the majority of us, it's the emotional addictions are even worse. We have to get certain feelings from other people, or we don't even like them. And if we meet a person who never gives us any good feelings, we don't like them at all. Because they don't give us any good feelings. Does that make sense? And that's because we have our addictions we want met by other people. And then we find ourselves, whenever our addictions aren't met, we go into anger every now and then. Frustration, annoyance, because our addictions are not being met. Yeah? And that's an indication that we are unable to feel our fears. Because if we were willing to feel our fears, we wouldn't want our addictions met. So all of these things, if we're humble, we will feel them. If we're not humble, we will deny they exist. We will make them go away, we'll try to make them go away with techniques. So, when I was younger, I had to have a massage every single week. This was when I was working, 100 hours a week. I had to have a massage every single week. If I didn't have a massage every single week, I'd feel really annoyed. that I couldn't get my booking. I used to book it in advance, months in advance, every single week. Because I didn't want to feel what that made me get over, what that made me, avoid in my life. Now, if I have a massage, it's a very pleasant experience that I have occasionally, but it's not every single week without fail, because it's no longer an addiction. How many of you in the morning, you get up in the morning, the very first thing, what is it? Coffee. Why is that? What does coffee do for you?
Makes us up.
It makes... You know what's happening for many of us with coffee? You see, when we're asleep, we do things. Right? In our, what I call our sleep state, we're doing things. See, sometimes in our sleep state, so when we're asleep, if we can think about it this way, I'll just draw it. Here's our physical body laying down. What happens is our soul and our spirit body, so our soul and our spirit body, leave our physical body and they go to locations in the spirit world. The problem for many of us that the locations we go to in the spirit world stress us out. Right? And there's this, and then on the way back to the earth, we go through, there's a level of darkness around us usually, associated with the earth and what's happening around the earth. So on the way back, there's this fear that comes in play straight away, on the way back to our body. So when we wake up in the morning, these two join again. And in that moment, the very first thing we want is something to make our fear not feel as bad. And something to make our sadness not feel as bad. We need a pick-me-up of some kind. Something that will get us going and moving. And so most of us turn to some kind of stimulant. Yes? I don't know about my drawing of a cup here. Right? Coffee. The coffee picks us up, and it's the caffeine that we're really addicted to, not the coffee. Because the reality is, the way they manufacture coffee now, you can have coffee without caffeine. I wonder how well that would do as a sale item. In Australia, we have this place that only sells coffee without caffeine. Really nice coffee too, really tasty coffee. But it doesn't have as much demand because it's without the caffeine. And it's the caffeine, the drug, the caffeine, gets the system going and helps us to avoid some emotions. It's helped us to avoid humility, to get away from things. My suggestion is if every single morning you have a cup of coffee, for the next 1 month, try not having a coffee. Try it for 1 month and see what emotions come up. We'll see how you really feel in the mornings.
How about using wonderful classical music instead of coffee?
Okay, so then we go for an alternative. So now we go for, and this is what happens a lot in New Age circles too, yes? We substitute one thing for another thing. So I get coffee, and I go, okay, coffee's not good for me, it's causing issues for my heart or whatever else, I explain it away to myself. And so instead what I do is I substitute that with something else, whatever that other thing is. Now for some people on the New Age path it might be meditation, right? Or classical music. Now they have less effect on my body, so I justify it and I say I'll have these instead because it has less effect on my body. But aren't I really creating another addiction to replace the other one? Wouldn't it be better to find out the reason why I needed to have those things? This is called another law, the law of cause and effect. Wouldn't it be better to find out what the cause of me waking up feeling quite agitated and upset is, than it would be to try to deal with the effect of the agitation? Does that make sense to everyone? You can see that if we deal with the cause, then it's permanent. We fix it forever. If we deal with the effect, we're going to need to listen to our classical music every day or need to meditate every day instead of having our coffee. Isn't one an addiction just as the other? This one's a bit higher addiction maybe because it's damaging us physically maybe, but it's still an addiction. It's still an emotional addiction. Can you see that?
Could the cause was that it's going very deep down in the childhood?
No, the cause is not about your chakras, it's about your emotions.
No.
Alright, it's always about your emotions. Your emotions create your chakras. So even if you look at, so for those of you who have been interested in spirituality, you know that there are 7 main chakras in your body, and then there are, I think it's 192 or something, other chakras in your body. Every single one of those chakras is affected by an emotion. So if you sort out the emotion, then the chakras automatically sorted out. You don't have to worry about the chakra. But if you sort out the chakra without sorting out the emotion, then the very next day you're going to have to sort out the chakra again. And again, and again, and again, and again. Can you see it's the same as doing this? It's just another addiction, another thing that's not fixing up the cause. So what we need to do is we need to focus on the cause of why we feel bad when we wake up in the morning.
But could the chakras help us to find out?
They can help us, but they are not the cause, they are the effect.
Yeah.
Yep. So they can help us so we can say, okay, I can feel here in my second chakra, I wake up and there's all this tightness in here and it feels bad and I feel a bit sick and all that. That can help us find what the emotion is. But it's easier to just feel the emotion, you know? Or this chakra here, which is very much a chakra around your fear. Your fear dominates this chakra, right? So if you find every week you've got to go and get some spiritual healing and the person does a bit there and they say, this is blocked here again. And they do that and then 2 weeks later you go back and they say, this is blocked here again and do that again and so forth and get that open. But the problem is, it's your fear. Where is your fear coming from? You need to address that. When you address that, this will automatically be open. Yes?
But you say that it doesn't feel in us to come back to our body.
But only because of certain feelings we have within us. So what are we afraid of? We've got to find what we're afraid of. Now, for many of us, we don't like our life on earth very much. We feel frustrated, annoyed, upset with it. We don't want to change. We feel a lack of desire. We feel a lot of fears in our day-to-day awake life. And when we go into the spirit world, we don't have them as much. And then when we come back, we have them more. And then when we go sleep again, we don't have them as much. So when we come back, we're afraid of coming back because we don't like our life here. Now, what do we do there to fix up the cause? Fix up our life. If we fix up our life, we'll be looking down from the spirit world going, I want to go back, into that life. But for the majority of us, we don't do that because we don't like that life. We don't like the restrictions in that life, our day-to-day mundane drudgery that many of us have. And so we are afraid of entering our body. We need to find the reason why. We need to find the cause, rather than try to fix the effect. And that's an actual law that I've discovered called the law of cause and effect. It's an actual law that God has made for the adjustment of the universe. If you don't find the cause, it's pointless dealing with the effects over and over and over again. Pointless. It's like, I often liken it to imagine you have 3 children. And those 3 children are like monsters. So let's call them the 3 monsters. From the moment they wake up in the morning to the moment they go to sleep at night, all they do is cause destruction. Now, if you're one person, you can go around fixing up their destruction. Day after day after day after day. Can't you? So you imagine, you wake up in the morning, by the time you open your eyes, you walk into another room and there's the destruction all ready for you to fix up today. And so you start your day-to-day effort, you know, tidying up, cleaning up, vacuuming the floor, doing all the things, fixing up after these monsters, as they are creating more, right? So by the end of the day, you might have cleaned up a bit, but if there's 3 monsters, highly unlikely you've cleaned up the whole lot. You go to bed exhausted. You wake up the next morning, what's ready for you the next morning? Exactly the same thing, possibly worse. You go through the whole day trying to tidy up after them. You go to bed exhausted. You wake up the next day. You get the idea? Exhausted, wake up the next day, exhausted, wake up the next day. After a week of this, what are we feeling? Angry, upset, right? And the reason why is because we are not changing the cause. What's the cause? 3 monsters causing destruction. That's the cause. We need to stop them causing destruction. Right? This is what our life's often like. We often have these monsters in our life, some emotions that we have unhealed, causing destruction in our life, and we're going along afterwards, running along behind, trying to fix up the effect. And we never address the cause. If we address the cause, we'll fix it up today. Any single thing in your life that's going wrong, you can fix up usually within a day. Permanently, I mean. Right? But we have to address the cause. We can't just address the effect. And this is one of the fundamental truths about God and the universe. The problem with mankind is we are addicted to dealing with effects and not causes. So, you know, in Sweden, how many laws are there in Sweden? Do you know? Most of you have no idea, right?
It's impossible to say.
It's impossible to say, because there must be huge, hundreds of thousands of them, potentially, maybe even more. Right? Every single day you might be doing something that breaks one of those laws, right? And you'll have no idea until somebody actually takes you to court, or somebody, and then you become aware generally. Now, why is that the case? Why do we have so many laws? Because what we do when something goes wrong, instead of fixing the cause, we create a law to fix the effect. That's what we do. Right? And we create another law to fix the effect, and another law to fix the effect, and so forth, until we've got thousands of laws, or hundreds of thousands of laws, all done to fix the effects. Now, can you see how most of the causes have to do with love? If the whole population was loving, how many laws could you get rid of? The majority of them, could you? If all of us were loving and we were consistently loving with each other, you could get rid of the majority of laws. Yeah? But the way society is now, we can't do that because nobody seems to want to be loving to each other. And so what we need to do is make laws to prevent them from doing things. And then what do we do with those laws? Every law has a punishment system, does it not? So, I do something that's unloving, and all of a sudden everybody else says, that was pretty unloving, we've got to create a law to stop him from doing that. So they create a law, and the law has a punishment. So we'll put you in jail for 30 days for doing that. Right? That's the punishment. But does that correct me? Does that change me? It might, a little. But does it actually change the reason why I did what I did? No. And this is the problem we face on the planet. We need to start changing the reasons why we do things rather than actually changing the action. That's the law of cause and effect. So can you see how if we enable ourselves to look at these 3 things, we can start looking at all these different laws and all these different principles around the place, and we can start seeing the logic and start seeing where we need to make changes. And if we're humble, we will make the changes. We will. If we're not humble, we will not.
So we can solve every problem with your motto here?
Yes, every problem on the planet can be solved with these 3 things. If it's fully engaged by every person on the planet, of course, which is the difficulty. But the issue we face, though, I feel, is that it needs to begin with somebody. You see? You see, what most of us do is we look at those things and we start applying them and we start seeing the logic and we start saying, yes, I can see how if all of us did that, things would be very, very different on the planet. But the problem is, my next door neighbour doesn't want to do that. He wants to yell at me every time I do something he thinks is wrong. And see, I don't feel it has anything to do with my next door neighbour. I feel it's got everything to do with me first. I need to engage this first. Before anyone else is willing to even engage it, I need to engage it. So that means that even if everyone is unloving towards myself, I am still going to be loving. If everyone feels that I am to blame, even if I'm not to blame, I'll be humble and I'll feel what it feels like that everybody thinks I'm to blame. Does that make sense? I'll do that rather than hurt them. I'll do that rather than damage them.